For this project, I'm going to use two router bits. The first one is this very narrow tipped bit called a profile bit. It has two cutting edges on it, which are called flutes. This bit is a 90-degree V-groove bit because the tip of it is at a 90-degree angle. It also has two flutes on it. As with all cutting operations, the sharper your bits are, the faster they'll cut and the cleaner they'll cut. I've experimented with several different ways to sharpen my router bits, and the way that's working best for me right now is this unusual little credit card diamond stone. It's made by Trend, and it has two sides on it. One is a rough and the other is a fine cutting surface. When you're sharpening these bits, you want to have the edge of the bit set right flat against that stone right there. If you tip it up this way, you're going to lose all your edge. What you have to do is get it just perfectly flat on there and then run it back and forth. I find that very, very difficult to do, and these are much more difficult to sharpen than most bits because they're so small. But the best way I've found to hold them in place is to take my cordless drill, which has a nice heavy flat battery on the bottom of it, and put them in so that they're just barely inserted there. Tighten it down, and then I can take the credit card sharpener and run it back and forth. Now, the sharpening stone, to keep it from fouling, you'll want to put a couple of drops of this lapping fluid on the stone. And then what we do is we try to run it back and forth here, as flat on that surface as I possibly can. The best router bits are made out of carbide, and the only thing that you can sharpen a carbide router bit with is diamond. This little credit card sharpener is not terribly expensive. It's definitely worth it. But just a few passes and your bit will cut much better. The router that I'm going to use for this project is a rigid trim router. This router is perfect for this type of work. It's small and relatively lightweight, and yet it has a very powerful motor. If you turn it around here, you can see that you have excellent visibility underneath the router. Very, very important for this type of work. And it even has an LED light underneath that comes in very, very handy. The router also has a micro adjustment for the depth of cut that I like very much. I've made a couple of nice modifications to this router. The first and most obvious is this black hose on the back. I have this connected to my shop vac so that instead of having all the sawdust come flying out in front of me, the sawdust is now sucked back into my dust collector so that my shop stays a lot cleaner. Another benefit of that I discovered afterwards is that the bit actually runs much cooler because I have a very large amount of airflow going right past the bit. With the bit spinning at 30,000 RPM, it develops an awful lot of heat. The other modification that I've made to the router is this very large clear plastic base. It's made out of acrylic, and the original base was also clear, but it was the same size, of course, as the base of the router, which makes perfect sense for what the router was designed for, but in my case I needed something larger. An advantage, as you'll see a little bit later on, is when I'm cutting the crystal pattern out here in this part of the carving, this large plastic base can be resting on the tops of these letters. As everything gets cut away, it has something to sit on. If I didn't have that, by the time I got all the way out here to the tip of that star, it would be falling off or not even supported at all. So this large base is a must-have. We're going to load the profile bit into the router. These bits are much safer than the large bits. You'd really have to work at it to get yourself cut, but you can. Okay, just Put that in and tighten it with these 2 wrenches, and it's ready to go. Now, how do you set the depth of these bits? Well, what I did was I experimented quite a few different times and got something that I liked. Once I found something I like, I then have this, what I call a story stick. And you'll see that these were the settings for a carving I did called Contigo. And this one was Fear Not Angel. And so I write that right on there. The carving I did one time, Gozo, used a single 1/4 inch straight bit, and that was the depth that I cut it at right there. Now, when I did my last Shalom star, like we're going to be doing today, these were the depth settings that I used right here. Okay, so I'm going to release the bit, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to adjust it so I get just a little bit of drag as I move through that cut that I made last time. That should be right about right. So I lock it back down again, and now we're ready to cut. The router itself makes a tremendous amount of noise, and the vacuum cleaner is pretty noisy too. This new shop that I built is also an echo chamber, as you can probably hear in the video. So it is absolutely imperative that I use hearing protection while I'm working on this. I'm using earmuffs, and I've gotten to where I like them better than earplugs. The earplugs actually work a little bit better, but the earmuffs are always there. You can take them off, put them back on. They're always there, you don't get dirty. So to hold the carving in place, I'm going to be using this rubbery mat type material. When you put that down the table, it's a little bit tacky and it holds onto the table, and then your carving holds onto that. So usually I don't have to have a lot of clamps. The clamps really get in the way because if I have a clamp like this, when the router table, especially this large plate comes around, it's going to hit that, and that doesn't work too well. So most of the time I'm going to be trying to carve without the clamp.